I think reading is important. Probably if I had to say that the one subject that I would focus on, again, that I would probably be looking at more than any is reading. I think I grew up in a military family, traveled East Coast to West Coast. One of the things I was proud to say is that my mother made sure that I always had books to read. I was, always with my peers, because moving from, every year and a half really takes a little toll. But, having that background, allowed me to pursue and open up doors of opportunity. And I think one of the things we've looked at across the state, that, talking with the governor, the General Assembly, I think we're going to see a commitment to literacy in our state and making sure that our children are grade level by the end of third grade. It is that critical. Research shows that, and that's going to become a focus of what we're about. But also with math. Math is something I think, unfortunately in Georgia over the past few years, we've struggled with. Speaking with one of the math teachers today, and he said, Richard, I've had, I think maybe 5 or 6 curriculum within a very short period of time. And so we've changed and done some things with that. But I did assure him and said, we're going to stabilize that. We did a few things this year, I think, that will help all of our school systems as options that really they did not have. But looking at how we deliver algebra and geometry. Now you can teach those courses what we call a more scientific method, discrete method, but it basically means you just teach all algebra by itself or geometry by itself in isolation, which is the way in which many of us grew up learning. And we had always had that option, but unfortunately in the state of Georgia, we never had the test that actually backed that up. So if you were taking a discrete model, well, you would be tested in the integrated model. And really that did not make sense. And so we truly did not have an option that was there. But also with our young people, and again on the campaign trail, what many parents, Richard said, I can't help my child because we're learning math or doing things that are completely different. What sometimes I refer to it as a different form of math, but what you may say is, the lattice method, but instead of, aligning numbers up and learning basic, math in a traditional, and again, probably you would say for what most people are experienced throughout the state and what we grew up with, it was hard. And like I said, we cannot afford to disenfranchise our parents. We have to keep them engaged. And so we did come out, right there at the end of the school and said that, listen, the teachers, if the traditional math is what is best for your children, then teach them that. One of the things we've looked at, and again, even sharing here, is that we have a large military, presence in the state of Georgia. Well, most schools across the states, throughout the United States, we still teach in traditional math. And so it does put a strain on military families when they're exposed to things and going in and out of systems. So I think having a little bit of uniformity has helped out. But also with looking at math, we've done some things, and what we hope to see in the future, is addressing some of the issues with our special needs children. I think with our special needs children, we have a performance diploma. Well, your schools get no credit for that. They were essentially counted as dropouts. Even though they accomplished everything that the IEP, and again, what we say that they can meet, they do the work, but we say it's less than. And that's not fair. And so we're working on this year, and that'll be something we look at to ensure that all of our children are treated with dignity and fairness, because these children are doing and you're giving the best they can. And I think we should not penalize that. Your school systems should not be penalized for that. But in the area of that, what I've recognized too is that one size does not fit all. Not every child is going to a 4-year university. Some will be going to the military. Some will be going into a technical school. Some will be going straight into business. And so we have to recognize that. And I think doing some things in which we say that every child doesn't need the same for math, the same for science, English, this nature. We need to look at, what we're talking about is life. And we need to look at what life and what common sense say that children need. And I think that having, some things which I would say would be very similar to a college, course catalog, in which you do have some prerequisites. But as a child decides to go through certain pathways, maybe allow some of the supplemental courses to actually, even some of the core classes to really build on that. And, maybe an accounting counts as a math if you're having that strong area. Or maybe, looking at some of the different sciences that, perhaps could substitute that. Maybe computer science could count as a science. Or personal finance or financial literacy count as a literacy, doing some things of that nature. And so looking at what a child needs, and again, tying that into their education to make it more personal, I think would be good. I mean, children, you think about what you have done in your life. You're going to gravitate towards your screens. You're going to build upon your screens. And I think that's what we should allow, our teachers and our schools to do that, to better, address the learning needs and learning interests of students. Not to shortchange anything we do. Because I think that when a child leaves, education, they should have a full range of options. And that should be, a solid, public education. I think for myself, if you were to look at my background, when I graduated high school, I attended what we call back then vocational school, which today is our technical college. I've been a janitor for a church. I worked in a cotton mill. I worked in a peanut mill. I've been in business. I was a lead purchasing agent for a national, international laser company. Attended an engineering, school within the state, and again received 2 degrees from 4-year colleges. And so, those are things that we look at. And again, that's what, a good education is provided. Because I guarantee you that when I graduated Fitzgerald High School in 1980, becoming state school superintendent was not on the list. Those were things that we looked at. So, I think that's what we want to make sure that we're providing a good, solid education for our kids. But also, I think there are some things we talked about, basics. They need a good, strong math. They need a good, strong, English literacy background. But one of the things in talking even with some kids today that we're looking at, what many people across the state have said is that our kids really need a strong personal finance class. They need to know how to operate money. They need to know how to write a checkbook. They need to know that when you charge something on MasterCard, you eventually have to pay it back, okay? And thinking about things that preparing for life, how to buy a car, how to, what do school loans mean? When you finish college, like I said, most of that, unless you have scholarships, is not free. But to work with our counselors as well, to give our kids guidance in that area, to show them how to manage that, how to prepare for the future and think of things, that's something I think we need. And fortunately, we kind of moved away from that. Again, when we had this No Child Left Behind, we said everybody's going to college, and some of the life skills that really were needed, we basically threw out the window. And so I think it's time to put a little more common sense back into education. And so that's, one of the things we looked at. And also, training our kids about how to become good employees. That you have to show up for work. You have to dress appropriately. When you're dealing with people and customers, there are certain ways in which you carry your dialogue. And those are things that, that we're finding out. And to be quite honest, that's what kids are saying. That's, what they are telling. They want to know about life. They realize that life is more than putting A, B, C, and D on a test. And unfortunately, what we've done is that, the test has been something we always talk about now. It's the test, the test, the test. And probably in most of the schools in the state of Georgia today, or when they start back, they'll hear about the test early on. And unfortunately, I think what is done is we test too much in the state of Georgia, I believe. And I think that when we've tested too much in the state of Georgia, we put too much emphasis. And our teachers and our students really have test overload. And I think that if, what I've always found out, and again, it's, what we did so well in the state of Georgia, is that if you focus on the child, allow teachers to do their job, monitor what's going on, provide them with a safe school environment, that, somehow the tests magically take care of themselves. And you don't have to mention the word test. And I think that some of the things that we're looking at and trying to make some corrections with that, the amount of tests. I know I had a teacher share right there in the school that within the April-May testing window, that their school gave over 20,000 tests. I'm thinking, 20,000 tests. Is that what we have become? It's just, a testing culture. I have a student advisory committee, and I went down and just had a conversation with them, I think probably in March. And I said, just ask me questions. Well, every other question was dealt about the test. And I'm thinking, our kids, that's all we talk about is the test? And I said, if 50% of what they're talking about is the test, I know what's going on at the school. I know what's going on at home. And so we've got to look at what we test and how we test. And I think we are going to begin the process of having a testing inventory, which we're going to look at federal, state, and local tests in the state of Georgia. And I think that, looking at why we test, because that's very important. Tests really should be what I consider is very diagnostic in approach. I think that, when you look at a test, I think, trying to give smaller, more concise, tests during the course of the year so you can measure the progress of the child. I see it as going to the doctor for a physical. When you go to the physical, you take checkups and you make corrections as needed. But you always maintain, you have your yearly checkups. Well, that's really what needs to take place in the state of Georgia. And I think, unfortunately, what we have now, and especially even with our new milestone test, is really what I call more of an autopsy type report. Because you take it at the end of the year. And, for me, there's not really a whole lot you can do at the end of the year. And, as far as making corrections. Because when the children move to the next level, well, they're driven by the standards for that year. Because the teacher knows that's what they're going to be graded and held accountable for. So we have to look at what we're doing and how we're testing. Recently, I think for this upcoming year, what we were allowed to do is actually cut back on some of the tests. There's something we call student learning objectives, or SLOs. And so where, some teachers were probably giving 6 of those during the course of a year, well, now we've been able to move that down to either 2 or 1. So those are some options that, your school systems have. And so trying to put, the proper perspective of what testing is and what it should be, is some of the things we're looking at. We're teachers as well, we're, saying that, we realize we have good teachers and we have those that, that struggle. But we don't need to have our administrators, spend the exact same amount of time with every single teacher. Every teacher does not need 6 observations. The ones that are doing the great job, you know who they are. And in fact, I would rather have those that are doing a great job helping those that needs some help. And I think using and better utilizing the resources that we have, because we have a lot of great teachers in the state of Georgia. But there are those that as I've always kind of said, they need a little bit of love. They need to find out whether this is the profession that they really need to be. But I think in saying that is that we need, we're in contact and talking with higher ed, because higher ed needs to know that we eventually get to your students, and we are business as well. And so when students leave, college, they need to be fully prepared. So we're having dialogue with them to try to encourage them and say this is, the type of student that we need to eventually become our teachers and work with them. And so that's, something that, we're continuously looking at and working to improve as well. And I think that, for education in general, what I've shared across the state is that I do believe we have a great opportunity in the state of Georgia. I think we have the resources, we have the personnel, we have the commitment that is needed to really, meet the educational needs of all of our kids. So that, we always hear about the Massachusetts, what they're doing. Well, my goal is to make sure that we change that dialogue, and it's Georgia that we talk about. And I think we have a lot of great things going on in Georgia. We have a lot of great opportunity to do that. Yeah, it's going to take some work. But again, as I've shared before, I'm not afraid of work. I think any worthwhile endeavor requires some work. But it is something we have to be committed to. And I think that's something that, I try to bring to the plate here and I've shared with individuals that said, we need some stability. Well, I don't plan on going anywhere. I'm not running for any other office, and this is the commitment. It's my commitment to George, it's our commitment to you as parents, as teachers, educators, students, that, I'm here to the bitter end. Until, the people of Georgia decide that, it's time for me to go, or the Lord says this is it, then, I'm going to be here. Because it's going to take more than 4 years. I wish it would take less than 4 years, but it's not. We've got some work to do. But we can build upon what is going, what we are doing right. And, so I encourage you to be involved. Contact your legislators. This is something that requires us all. And again, when you contact your legislators, let them know. Let them not just say, I don't like this, but maybe offer some solutions. That's one of the things when I meet with groups and I tell them, this is what I ask as far as homework. I ask them, I said, please, if we're doing something right, let us know if we're doing right so that we don't change it and mess it up. But also if we're doing something wrong, then share with us what we need some help and support in. Give us some ideas. Because I guarantee you that one thing I found out, I can't run your school and micromanage it from Atlanta, Georgia. There's no way that I can do that. I know Washington, D.C. cannot do that, okay? But it's you at the local level. I am an individual that I am pro-local level, I'm pro-local control. You know your kids. And as far as I'm concerned, the Department of Education in the state of Georgia, we're here to serve. We're here to make sure that you are able to operate, that we can give you support, and that is what we're about. At the end of the day, and again, as I've shared, typically when I leave anywhere, I said, if I can be of service or the department can be of service, let us know. And that comes, from my heart with that. Because, as I shared, one size does not fit all. For you in Houston County, it may look completely different down in Irwin County, or up in Gwinnett County, or up in the mountains of, Whitfield County. So that's something we're looking at and trying to do that. I don't want to take too much time with that. I mean, we have a lot of great things going on within the state, but I do want to hear from you. If you have questions, if you have statements, or, you just want to, just share something on your heart with what's going on, or, then please, I want to do that. Because that's, as shared, I'm really your advocate. I'm your voice up there. When I speak to the state school board, when I speak to the governor, lieutenant governor, people across, the state, the General Assembly, with business, I want to make sure that people understand this is not Richard Woods talking, but it is the state of Georgia talking. I'm your elected representative. I'm a statewide constitutional officer. Even though a lot of people don't know about the statewide office, many times I've been out on the campaign trail and people said, Richard, I'd love to vote for you, but I don't live in your district. Well, Georgia's a very big district. We're actually the largest district east of the Mississippi. So, but we're working on to correct that as well. But and let me mention one final thing as well. That this is a lady from your area. We are doing some things in career technology in ag and engineering with that, our CTAE program. We are reaching out to business. We are asking them for their support to say, listen, business is saying that we need a qualified, workforce. Well, I'm telling business, if you want a qualified workforce, you need to invest in it. And that means getting involved with your schools. Not asking necessarily just for your money, but look at your resources. Look at your experience, your technology, and what you can bring. What are some things that we can do to truly have a great working relationship with business and in our education, but also with our municipalities. We're talking with our county leaders, our city leaders as well. Bringing all of us together, bringing our various departments of government together, and that's something we're doing. One of the ladies that's probably largely responsible for that is Dr. Barbara Wall, who was your CTA director here. It was your loss, but I can tell you, it was my game. Okay, that lady is a great lady, and she is a great asset. What I can say, not only now for just Houston County, but the entire state of Georgia. And I cannot keep up with it. That is one lady. If anybody travels and does anything more than I do, it is probably Dr. Wall. But I think you will see great things out of her and out of the CPA program, and really just seeing the opportunities for our kids that really we can't even imagine. It's almost like technology. It's out there, and it's already being created for the next generation. But I can guarantee you she's working for the next generation as well as preparing our kids today. So at this time, I think we have maybe a mic or something. We'll gladly take some questions, some statements. Anything want to ask me about my family, we'll do that. And I think whatever, we have a mic up here, I'm not sure whichever. Or...
Well, I can use my team voice.
Okay.
I'm Dorothy Smith. I'm a librarian here at Warner Robins, and I appreciate you being an advocate for us, but we'd like to know there's a lot of, I've got 33 years, this is my 33rd year in education, and there's a lot of nervous teachers and educators in the state on the prospects of Governor Neal's hypothesizing on giving up some of the benefits that we have as far as our years experience pay, our advanced degrees. I've got 2 advanced degrees, and it makes everybody really nervous, and so I was just wondering if you could address that.
Okay. Well, I would say at this point, nothing's locked in stone. What you hear is this is just thoughts. There's a lot of dialogue going on. I've been in contact with some folks within on the education reform committees. We're talking with some individuals. For myself, I know experience matters. I can tell you, Richard Woods is teacher day 1, and Richard Woods is teacher by year 14 is a completely different animal. What I can provide and do, is as a teacher, was really, it's just no comparison. And I think that for those of us who've been around education, teachers that, it really takes about 3 years to really get your feet grounded You know, where you feel like, I mean, most first-year teachers, I mean, it's usually, I stand at the front of the blackboard, not blackboard anymore, but whiteboard or whatever, but you don't move. You don't learn, necessarily the nuances of what instruction is about, because you focus so much on content, but also as learning and delivering. And that requires practice. It requires experience. I think it's, the question would be, something of that nature. You're having open heart surgery. Now, do you want, Dr. Woods the first day? This is my first time? Or would you like Dr. Woods who's done this a couple of thousand times? So I think it does matter. We talk about degrees such as, maybe a specialist or whatever. Those things are looking at that. I think looking at, what the degrees to make sure that they align with what's being, taught. I think, we look at quality. We want to make sure that we do. And I think in the past, sometimes we've had, I know that from my experience, that sometimes degrees were given away in certain areas, and probably were not a lot. I mean, I've been through professional development. And professional development at times was not all that great. I mean, it was a time where you sat back and just basically graded your papers and did things. And I think that's something we have to look at and try to, share with individuals. And so we are, in talks with that. I think that, that I would encourage that every person. This is, something that will be largely handled by the legislature. And I think that for educators, you need to contact your legislature. You need to contact your representative, your senator, and let them know your concerns. That is what I would encourage. Because teachers, you can and should have a large voice. And there are a lot of educators in Georgia, and again, a lot of support people that are there. And, and I, like I said, for me, as a history teacher, a teacher of government who loves a representative form of democracy, we need to be involved. Not just to sit back, but again, for us as anyone that's concerned in our, whether it's our nation or local level or state level, these things, they represent a form of democracy. It's tough. It's easy to be a dictator, okay, and tell you this is the way it is. But for us as individuals, we have to get out there and be involved. And that's why I think, please join us on, the DOE website or Facebook. We will try to keep people informed as much as they can. But I would say for any educators that nothing is in stone. There's a lot of things that 1 week things may change. They're having some ongoing meetings. We're sharing that. We'll continue the dialogue and, representing you up there. Because as I shared, I think there is a place, I think experience does count. Degrees do count. So we'll continue to work on that. But, please, as I shared, let your representatives know. Let them know your concerns. Encourage your colleagues to say, just call. It doesn't take just a few minutes a day. And if you do something, probably I would encourage it just like that, write a short letter. Not so much an email. Emails, as they tell me, that they kind of get lost. But if it's a short letter, that means you care because you took the time. So phone calls and letters there. Or either if you can, and I would say, invite your legislators, to meetings. Have a town hall meeting. I took time to come down, and I think these individuals will as well. Okay? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
That was my question. I'm going to try. You know, I wanted to see one. You let it do it. All right. And then we try this in the 23rd year and enjoy it all. Same question. I had written down, but she threw up a couple of you covered, just saying that I couldn't imagine anyone going to education because we're going to have experience and degrees. We kind of all the babies out of summer to 10 summers to receive a master's of 6-year degree. And I can understand what I enjoy doing. I couldn't afford to do it. So say all that was the same as the name was accidents when I heard it. I can't imagine anybody, I can't imagine the governor's committee what's going to be installed. This all you consider. I mean, how do you, I can leave it on that committee, have a child or a grandchild say, at least you put in education because it's a great profession. They're not going to pay you for your experience. They're not going to pay you for your degrees. I mean, that's the sense. I appreciate your comments and talking to the meeting and people have some South Georgia background.
Well, again, like I said, I know this is a very critical issue. I mean, it's election year, so there are things to look at doing. And then even just, I think even teacher retirement has been kind of thrown in the mix as well. We have a great teacher retirement system. And I think that, again, just looking at some things, what we are trying to do is that we're trying to look at what some other states have done. Some other states have kind of followed a little bit in this vein. So it's like looking at the results that are here. And, because we want, the people that are making decisions to be knowledgeable. But, there again, we're looking at retaining and keeping and encouraging great people to come to the profession. And if you want people to do that, they've got to have a reason to go. And I think there are some things that we look at that, I think that even, when I used to teach, and when I was there, we used to have, we had AYP, and at the beginning of the year, we were kind of, when it first started, we were always rewarded for, the schools were giving some extra money, and I think they were giving them to, some of the teachers and that. But by the time I finished, we got a certificate. Well, certificates don't buy groceries, okay? And that's just the way it is. And so we've got to be meaningful and look at that, because I think we've got to work at keeping our workforce. We want the best. Again, one of the things that I heard during the campaign was that, when our veteran teachers, for the first time in my life, I heard veteran teachers, they were really encouraging people not to get into this profession. And they were very cautious with that. But, we're going to continue to work. We're going to work with the governor. We're going to work with our General Assembly. And, and I said, so right now, you just, like to maintain that dialogue with your elected representatives. Let them know what's going on. Let the governor know what's going on. Let the lieutenant governor know your thoughts. Because, they just need to know what you're saying in the field. And I will share. But the more voices that are out there, then they'll be heard. It is something that's very critical, and I don't think anyone, everybody involved is taking this very serious. And, I think, we're looking at different things. We're going to look at, maybe proposing some different models there and saying that, hey, this is an experience model. This is, what that takes experience and the degree is in the consideration. So, it is an ongoing process. Nothing is, in stone, but please let your voices be heard. And let it be heard early rather than late, because these discussions are ongoing. And at some point in time, they will come to an end. And that would be my encouragement there. Like I said, it is something that you're talking about livelihoods of people. You're talking about retirement. You're talking about the future. But there again, I think that what I found out is that people do listen. I've had discussions with the governor. I've had discussions with the lieutenant governor, with our chairs, on the educational committee. And there's some, we have good people that are willing to listen. They just need to hear your voice. Because there is, other voices that are being out there. So I would encourage you to do that. We'll get through it. But we have to make sure we protect our workforce. Because I want the best. Every child deserves a great teacher. If you want a great teacher, you got to give great people reasons to become the profession. And I know not everything is based on money, but it does kind of help out. It helps pay the bills. Okay, someone else.
Would, if I could.
Sure.
I just wanted to make a comment in reference to our teachers. And our teachers do more today than they've ever done, I feel like, at any time. And, along the lines of raises, they've not gotten raises, cost of living raises for a long, long time. And you make mention of the teacher evaluations, and this is just my belief. And my belief is the thing that maybe your office could do at this point would be make changes with teams and leagues that would give them some relief immediately, rather than having to wait for a legislative session or having to wait for a commission to decide what's going to be the outcome. I think that would have an immediate impact on our teachers and our administrators. And I do agree with what you said, that we would be able to spend the time with the teachers that need help. And I think I heard you say one time, even the custodians in the building know who's bad people. And we have a history of, if they're not doing a good job, they don't work for us. And I think the teachers that are here are a testament to the quality that we have in Houston County. So I just appreciate your consideration of that.
Right. Again, I think if we look at Teach Links, that's really the evaluation system that we use for both our teachers and administrators. We have looked at some things that roughly 50% of evaluation for teachers is based on the test given a day on a day or a year. And so, but I think there's more to teaching than that. For your administrators, it's roughly 70% of their evaluation that is based on that. So we are trying to look at that. We're addressing some things. And one of the things we've looked at is saying if we are stuck. And right now, part of what we're dealing with is state law. So those are issues that we have to work with to see whether it is policy, whether it's state law, whether it's federal law. Again, up in Washington, D.C. right now, we're looking at reauthorization of what was known as No Child Left Behind. It really goes back to the Early Childhood Secondary Education Act, which goes back way to the 1960s. And so with that, things may change. It may change for all of us depending on what happens in Washington, D.C. But we're, engaged with our Washington counterparts up there, dealing with our congressional delegation, with our two U.S. senators, and so they're hearing some things. And, we're trying to, relieve, some of the things. And there's some common sense, approaches to that. But I think with Teach Links, our evaluation system, we are working with some people. Again, there's a lot of things behind the scenes that I can't really say it's out there right now, but we are doing that. Looking at our school system, how we evaluate that, something we call our CCRPI, or College and Career Readiness Performance Index. Doing some things there where where you're actually rewarded for the things you were doing. We want to encourage innovation. Well, if you're going to encourage innovation, you've got to take some of the rigidity out of the process. So we are doing some things in that area that hopefully will allow your school system to maybe eventually get a menu of items that best addresses their needs and what you can do. So, there are some things there, and I think that's there where we hear the dialogue, and again, if you have suggestions, things that you say, hey, this would really help us out, whether it's from the school level, whether it's from the parent level, always let us know at the DOE. Right now, I have a notebook that I kind of keep up in my office, and it comes with people who have solutions. Things that say, this would really, really work for us. And so that's something we're looking at. We have a brand new superintendent advisory board that we can get cranked up this fall. We've already had a small meeting, but I want to hear from the superintendents. We have a teacher advisory board. Again, I'm not sure, Ron, we're with Ron somewhere back here, or back in the back, or with Matt. The process, we'll try to make sure that we allow, because I want teachers from all over the state and all walks of life to be involved with that. So we can hear from you. We have a student advisory board. We have a parent advisory board. We will eventually come up now, then we'll have a business advisory board. So we are trying to hear from people, again, because I believe communication is extremely important. When I talk about communication, it does not mean everything just flows downhill, but it should be an active dialogue so that we listen. And so we are working on that, and so we'll continue to listen here across the board with that. One other thing I did want to say, kind of share with this, kind of backtrack a little bit, maybe off topic. So, I think in teaching and reaching out, we talked about the child, looking at personal finance classes and things of this nature. I think one of the things I found out, that one of the things you do well here is in the area of fine arts. Fine arts is important. Drama, band, chorus, art, everything in that vein is important. Because we talk about critical thinking. Well, guess what? Fine arts really, that's the part of the brain that they really launch into. And I think that's one of the things that we want to make sure. Unfortunately, when people start seeing cuts, that's one of the areas that gets cut quickly. So I commend you for keeping that and doing that, but that's something that we've got to have a commitment at the state. And I think working with the governor, again, one of the things with this Fine Arts Commission, we want to get more support in that area. When I stepped on board, in January, we did not have a single fine arts person at all in the Department of Education. But now we at least have one person. So we're looking at, increasing that to give that support with it. And I think, allowing kids to do other things. I think we tried to, reach out to the whole child. And, one of the things we teamed up with Dr. Commissioner Fitzgerald and, promoted something called Power Up for 30. Well, that just simply allow your kids to become active for at least 30 minutes a day. And we're growing with them. And kids are kids. I don't know, if I were to sit here and just lecture you for about the next 3 hours, you'd probably get a little antsy. You want to get up and stretch and move around. Well, children are no different. And I think that we have to allow them to get up, and sometimes just, as I always say, just allow them to be kids. Allow them to get out and play. Allow them to decompress, so that we can reset their brains so they'll be ready to learn. So those are some things also that we are trying to work on and encourage, across the department as well. So, other questions, statements? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about overall discipline in the schools. Let me give you a little bit of an example. I'm a parent and a taxpayer, and I just wanted to tell the teachers I'm really appreciative of all their work and dealing with the kids during the week and day in, day out. You mentioned that not all education should just fit, all kids.
Yes.
Discipline, I feel, is the same way. At the school my child attends, it seems that discipline is kind of dealt with in one-size-fits-all manner. Let me give you an example. On the last day of school last year, my daughter, who is an A&B student, she's on the Beta Club. She's an athlete. She's never been in trouble, and she's in the 10th grade. She's never been in trouble this whole time, and never even been called to the office. Well, I got a letter on the 24th of July saying my daughter's going to spend the first 3 days of school in ISS. So, of course, I'm shocked. The date on the letter is May 22nd. I found out the reason why she has ISS is because she was in contact with her dad on a text message on the last day of school after she finished her final exam. She was supposed to exempt all the rest of her exams. In the real world, we get a warning, and maybe contact with the parent to say, look, this is what we discovered. Give the parents some kind of opportunity to come and discuss what the situation is. And then if it wasn't something that was malicious, it wasn't a big discipline problem, it didn't disrupt school. A lot of the students were leaving at the same exact time. But we came to the principal, we discussed it with him, and it was basically like, well, if we do it for one, we have to do it for all. And there were other students that did the same exact thing that are sitting in ISS for the first 3 days of school. My daughter has always been one who loves school. First day of school, so excited. This year, she's not excited about school. And it really dampens their spirit when you're not taking into effect the whole student, the big picture of, do we want to encourage these students to want to go to school and be involved and happy in school, or do we want them to sit and be just machines and not have real life experiences where they're given a warning, given an opportunity to rectify the situation and learn from their mistakes, even with just a warning? If you could address that, I appreciate it.
Well, I think from a state level, again, it's a little bit different from my position with that. And I think that, anytime we deal, and that's where I deal with legislators. At one time we basically had a zero tolerance policy. And again, that was, things that even I had to deal with. I mean, you think about a kindergarten child who just picks up his dad's, pocket knife. Doesn't mean anything by it. Then, you have to call the police, and it becomes a much bigger thing than what it should be. And I think that for us at the state, it is trying to do some things, trying to make some corrections, make sure that, that I think that through policy, it's a little bit easier to change because you don't have legislation. And I think we have to be very mindful of that we do not create something that, is disruptive. It takes allows school systems to have the flexibility. So I think that's what we can do in our, on a local level. I think, you're following the right path. And I think, being in contact with the legislature, or with your principals and doing those things, and, I think, contacting your board, and I can't address local policy with that, and I definitely don't want me to be in local policy with that, but, and I think you're coming to process, and you're hearing, and you have, school officials that are here, you have board members that are here tonight, and I think you're having a dialogue with them. There again, I'm, just kind of coming off the top of my head with some things, because we don't want to, I think for, what you share with your child, she seems to be a wonderful young lady, an AD, student, never gets in trouble. That's very admirable. But with policies and things of that nature, I think you're handling it the correct way. You're going through the chain of command to say this is good. Hopefully, it'll be something that will be resolved and be with that. And I trust that your school, your local school board here, the superintendent and staff, to do what's right. And I think that I guess that's really all that I can fully address in that, because there again, it's locally, and I don't want to impose the state of Georgia upon anyone with that, because it's a little bit different situation. That's what I can give you.
I figured maybe it might have a trickle down effect, or, maybe a trickle up, I'm not sure.
Well, I think tonight, you definitely, people, like to add the local board members, and it's something that needs to look at. I found that, really our educators and people, they're people with a heart. They don't want to hurt any child. That goes across the state. And, I think there again, it's just a process we have to work through. Which is the best to have. And as far as I can say, if it's something in the state, if we end up doing something, please let us know. If it's something we need to change, and we can look into that. If it's a policy that's at the local level that has basically been enacted because of something at the state level, then we'll try to address that. And I'll just have to research that a little bit further on that. Okay? Danny, I think we have here, and then we'll go back to that. Yes, ma'am.
How are the opt-outs for testing?
I think with the opt-outs, we're really kind of waiting to see what's happening up in Washington, D.C. right now. I know that within the Early Childhood Secondary Education Act, there is some language that's in there. And so once we kind of see, I don't want to say this is how it will be, because the feds may come up and have something with that. But I think that's what we're kind of waiting to see. I know there is something that's in there. Some of the House language, or some of the language was a little bit twisted. It said you can opt out, but only like 5% opt out. You still have the 95% testing. And so what we're trying to do is work with our states and work with our school systems. We really don't want them to be penalized for the choice that parents have. So once we see what happens up in Washington, D.C., then we'll really know what our options here. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Now, is a principal able to refuse a letter from
It would probably depend. Really, that's more of a local decision. We do not have a state policy at present. Now, there may be something that may change. I know some legislation has been, again, I'm just letting you know what I'm hearing, that possibly would be proposed this upcoming legislative session. So, we'll just have to kind of see with that. But there again, I think I'm really looking at the feds, because I know that I've seen opt-out pieces within the reauthorization of no child economic. So, it could be that whatever happens up there, it may be null and void anything at the local level. It may just be stuff with that. Okay? We have questions.
Hey, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time to come out here and meet the masses. Well, not that many masses. When we met during your campaign, you talked about a lot of cool things that really interested me, and that's why I voted for you. The thing is that I have two experiences with family, my wife, and then we have a brand new vintage teacher, first year son in another state. You couldn't pay me her. Really. I'm a combat veteran, but it's scarier for me to be in the classroom. But when you were talking during your campaign, you talked about the relationship or not between Common Core and common sense. Explain.
I think where we stand on the issue of Common Core in the state of Georgia. Today, we have 2 Common Core line sets of standards, English language arts and math. That's not changing. Currently, what we're doing is that we are adopting science and social studies standards. With that, like I said, I was an opponent of Common Core standards. I did not like it. I thought we could have done much better with the standards. They were actually something that was really more proven and tried out there. In my stand is I have not changed it. Science and social studies, I believe that we need to develop our own standards in Georgia. And that's the route that we are going. Now within that, we also had a waiver with the process of No Child Left Behind, the race to the top. Well, we were able to get that reevaluated. Well, within the reauthorization, the state of Georgia actually had 2 choices. They could do what they initially did, take the Common Core route in math and English language arts. There was actually an option B. Option B said that as long as your institutions of higher learning supported your standards, then you could choose whatever you wanted to. Well, when I looked at the reauthorization, I went with option B. So now in the state of Georgia, we are no longer locked in to Common Core standards. There's no contractual agreement that is there. So, we will look at our standards, we will make sure that they are the very best, and we will make improvements. But we are there, like I said, we have complete flexibility over that. And whatever is best for Georgia, we will do. Again, I'm always here, and I think that we have educators, and we need to allow our educators to be a part of that process, like they were with our old Georgia performance standards, which people said this is, really was kind of a blueprint for what's out there. Well, if we're that good at writing them, then we don't need to believe, because in different states and different schools, you have to have flexibility. And I think that's one of the things we look at. We're trying to give us the maximum amount of flexibility, still being accountable, but we got to do what's best for Georgia. Again, that's what we're going to continue to do. So that's where we're at right now with the force of standards and the issue of Common Core. Okay? All right, I know we have, let's go way back here, and then we'll kind of work on us all a couple back there. Can everyone hear me okay? If not, I'll go back to the mic. Okay.
I'm Matthew Honeycutt. I'm a student from Veterans, and I'd like to start out saying that there is a lot of stuff our system does right, a lot of opportunities that not everyone in every part of the country has. I was able to go to the Governor's Honors Program. There's a lot of AP courses that are available, and I think there's a lot of things we do right, but at the same time, I have a lot of concerns about when certain courses are required or encouraged, that it kind of keeps us from being able to make a decision. Because the common thing we're told is that when you get to college, you'll change your major 3 or 4 times. And I'm one of the few kids at my age that knows what they want to do, or maybe think I know, I don't know. But I feel like that mindset's kind of risky financially, because every time you change your mind, that's a bit of a setback. That's something you have to pay for. And I feel like, from my perspective, my goal is to get into business and eventually into law, and I want to load up on statistics and social studies and a few literature classes, but physics is required for me to graduate because I took chemistry instead of physical science, so I have to sacrifice classes that I wish to take and I feel will benefit me in the future to take a class which is useful for some people, but realistically for me would probably never quite come to fruition. I feel like for a lot of students who don't necessarily have goals or good skills and things that aren't in the traditional core academics, it kind of hurts them because we kind of subtly encourage students to go into something we learn, with social studies or science or math or language arts, and all these aspects are important. I'm not arguing for the abolition of those classes, but when you have them do certain classes at certain ages, I feel like it keeps them from being able to explore and find out what they're good at. And it discourages the whole CTAE aspect of it, which nowadays is where most of the money is being made.
Well, again, one of the things, and again, as I shared before, I don't believe one size fits all. Does everybody need to take the same this, and this, which we've really created a very rigid system. Again, part of this is coming out of that No Child Left Behind era, in which we said every child is going to a 4-year university. Well, not every child is going to a four-year university. Not every child is going to the same track. And that's why in colleges you have the humanities, okay? You have science, you have the math, and there's diversification. You have engineering. And I think that's one of the things we're looking at as for you as students are the graduation requirements. You know, giving you some choice that better aligns, like right now you're saying you feel pretty comfortable about where you're going. Well, then we need to have courses that support that. Again, as I shared, with having a really more of a college course catalog. That if you know you're going into these fields, there are some basic courses that I think that whatever area you go in that vein, whether because you may have constitutional law, maybe juris law, and you're not sure what you're going into, but there are probably some core things that you need. Maybe it's statistics. You know, these are things that we look at. Maybe that can count as a math, one of the math. I mean, for me, when I graduated, I had algebra, you could get by, I think with geometry, but for my path and where I knew I was going, trig and calculus was not something that would support what I'm looking at. Well, for you, maybe, these other four maths, maybe an accounting, maybe a business law or something like that. Maybe business law would be something in the English area that would be, or business literature. That would be something. So we are going to look at making some recommendations in that area. It's just going to take some time. But also when we look at making those changes, we have to talk with higher ed. So again, these are to make sure that our colleges and our universities, that they're on board for those things as well. So it is not just, K-12 that we make decisions, but we are working with other groups and we have to take those thoughts into consideration. But that's something I can share with higher ed because I do meet with all the agency heads. And so we have these dialogues. So any recommendations and things you would share, again, for anyone here, please, contact us at the DOE. You can contact me through my email, and that would be things I want to hear. But we are looking at that and looking at hopefully making some changes and really kind of spread the opportunities for you as a young person. Yeah, I think we had somewhere. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm Lloyd McDonald. I'm a band director at Peggy Middle School here. I want to first thank you for putting a fine arts specialist up in Atlanta. Makes me feel good about what we're doing down here, that we have some support there. I also appreciate your common sense commentary and approach to a lot of things we're looking at. This fall, our state's going to be looking at another constitutional amendment. First, a couple years ago, our charter school amendment. Now looking at the Opportunity School District Amendment. And you mentioned earlier, how you support local control. Well, now our state is now again looking at adding another layer of state bureaucracy. I just wonder what your opinion is or what your thoughts are on the need for that and what's going to come forward.
I think, the references to the people, I guess directly the Opportunity School District. Yeah, that's the the amendment that will be up for discussion. One of the things when I first took office, for any school to potentially be a struggling school, I said that's not acceptable. And I met with my staff and I said what we were going to do, and this is when all of the dialogue was happening, and I said I don't know whether it's going to take place or not. But I've shared with people, I've shared with the governor, I've shared with with the agency heads. I said my job is that if this were to come into fruition, is to put that organization out of business. That means that we are going to work and focus on, getting our schools where they need to be. I think there's more to it than just saying, a lot of this is based on, again, what we call the CCRPI. There's the magic number of 60 that they're using. But we have to make sure that we do not over-regulate and look, very simplistically that it's just a number. Because I've been in the schools that have been below that area, and there's a lot of great education that's taking place. Our schools are now having to choose between, charter school system, IE square, or what they call the status quo system. And I think trying to give them some time to look at that. And I think, looking to maybe surely don't want to over-regulate and over-complicate the system. This is something, again, that the people of Georgia, you were going to vote. You were going to vote. And there again, it's one of those things that if this is passionate about, you've got to get out. You've got to let people know, you've got to contact people. Because to be honest, people said, how's this going to turn out? I said, I have no idea. I don't know whether, it will be something we can look at or not. And I think that with that, I just know something's going to happen at this point in time. But if it does not happen, or if it does happen, my goal is that, there are roughly 2,200 schools, public education schools in the state of Georgia. And I think that right now that if we were to take it, there would probably be about 141 that would be on the so-called list. So you're looking at probably less than 1% of schools in the state of Georgia. But that's less than 1% that I'm going to deal with. I've asked other schools. Again, this is one of the things that we have come out, that where I said schools, I said, we need your help. I said, we as a department can't address these needs. And what we have now is that we have schools that are volunteering, who are mentoring, who have been successful and have very like populations with schools that are on this list. And I said, let's help and work it. We've got several years to move that. We're looking at changes in the CCRPI that would allow the school system to move up, so it's not such a rigid school system itself. But and that's my commitment. I said, I think for any school system, any school, and if it was your school, I would be just as passionate saying we've got to get you off. We've got to see that you're improving. We've got to move you and make sure that our children are having the impact there. So we're talking with groups, we're talking with non-profit groups, bringing communities together to try to support our local schools, to make sure that each school, each class, each teacher that a child has is high quality, because they deserve their best. It's going to take some time. But there again, to what end, I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is that the people of Georgia will decide. But my commitment is, whatever does happen, is that any school that we have on there, that's going to be unacceptable. We've got to move. And there are some schools that have lived in a perpetual state of struggle. And we've got to look and see what's going on. Now, if it means that schools are doing the same thing over and over, we've got to change that. There are some things that I can do within my office, to make those changes. And so we're trying to enact that. But that's kind of where we stand with that, what we're doing, what we have been doing. And we'll find out whether it comes. Because if the people of Georgia reject that, we still have schools that struggle. And we've got to address that need. And that's my commitment to do that. Okay? Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you for being willing to be a leader for education in our state and for being here to speak to our community today. Everything that's been said, there's a lot of good ideas and a lot of improvements in instruction and the curriculum and everything. But I'd like to kind of know where you're going with the legislative agenda that you'll carry this year when there's a new session. And to the governor, as far as they seem to continue to try to pass legislation that is going more toward charter schools, and my concern is for profit charter schools more than anything else. And it's draining public education. And I'm sure it impacts you with the money that you get at the State Department as far as how you're able to help local systems. Where do you stand on that? Let me add this. They're also trying to dabble with TRS, with teachers' retirement, oftentimes. And as a parent and grandparent and former educator, I'm really concerned about public education and the funding for it. And I'm just wondering where you stand.
I think right now we do have a commission on basically school reform. Funding is one of the major topics that's there. We're hearing different things are coming out, so we know that the dialogue is kind of going fluid back and forth. It is looking at trying to give local school systems more of what I would say a block grant type setting, where you are given the money and you're kind of allowed to create the system that's best for you. School districts have now made a choice, which they could have chosen a charter school district. I think Superintendent, you Square here, with I Square. So, there were some choices there. I think we're kind of waiting to see what's going on. what that means, you know, and even I think that one of the things I've kind of thrown out recently is that, you know, taking the choices of what schools have in school districts to make sure it's not too rigid. You know, it may be that for some, the charter school works. For some, it's more of a traditional setting or, you know, a traditional governance that works. And, you know, and just trying to find a balance. But really that really needs to be determined here at the local level. I mean, you know, and I think that even within some of the larger schools, you know, what I envision is that you may have a traditional governance model or a traditional looking school, and in some cases maybe the charter is the best. But we don't think we really have a combo or a flex, you know, mentality that we have. But I think we have to kind of see and give this a little bit of time to see what's going on. Looking at the funding and things of this nature, that's why, I mean, I'm talking with legislators and, you know, in contact with them. Some things I can't say just because a lot of some things are in confidence, but nothing is set in stone. And that's why, you know, even dealing with teacher retirement and things of this nature, and it's important to me. You know, one day I hope that I retire at some point in time, you know, for this. My wife is a retired teacher. And, you know, I think that this is why it is important to be engaged, you know, at, you know, all levels of government. You know, largely, again, as I shared earlier, this is or will be a legislative issue. Your state representatives and your state senators will be the ones that ultimately have to put the signing, you know, dot on that. And that's why I encourage you, please call, please write these individuals. Let them know your concerns. You know, if you have friends, if you have other colleagues, you know, your votes do matter. And I can tell you that, I really am the poster child for a vote counts, and every vote counts. And during the runoff, and this was a state runoff I was engaged in, I only won by 700 votes. Okay, any county could have easily flipped that. And that's why your votes are important. That's why I am thankful for every individual that came out and voted, you know, for me. But it does require hearing that dialogue. Because if you do not contact your representatives, your senators, that means somebody else is talking to you. And it may not be the people you want. And again, that's where they're going to listen. So, you know, I would encourage you to do that, to reach out. We are having some discussions. Everything is still in motion right now. There's nothing written in stone with that. The charter school, you know, looking at that, I mean, charter schools are not, I mean, especially when you look at the research that's coming out today, it is not a silver bullet. It is not going to be, you know, earth shattering across the board, because it may or may not fit your school. It may or may not fit your community. Your needs may be completely different. And I think of a school system that has a lot of English language learners, you know, individuals that struggle there. Well, that may become a different need for someone. Somebody that has an affluent area where they, you know, kids, you know, are on grade level, they're doing some things. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But that is the best thing you can do. Because as I said, at the end of the day, this will be handled by the legislature. I will continue to offer my voice to do things to represent you, but I assure you, it needs to be more than just one person. It needs to be more than just Richard Woods saying this is what's out there. And that's why I come here to listen to you. So when I do come out and I do share, you know, it's not Richard Woods saying, this is what the people of Georgia, this is what our teachers, our retired teachers, our educators, our parents, this is what we're saying. And this is why it's important, you know, for people like me to be engaged, so I can share that with them. So I'll keep doing what I need to do. Please keep me informed, your concerns, you know, let me know. You know, I'll let you know, the people I come in contact with know. We are having those discussions right now, and things are, like I said, nothing is written in stone in these areas. That's why it's important to do that now. Okay? Anything else? So I know we're looking, probably getting closer. I'm going to take some time up. Turn my phone off so I won't ring the bell. But I would say this. I appreciate you coming out. You may think, well, it would have been great if we would have had this whole room filled. Sure, it would have been great. Well, that would have been wonderful. But you know, life happens. Not everyone can be there. But what you do have is that you have a voice. You can tell 10 people, we can tell 10 people, we can tell 10 people. Well, that's, you know, I learned a little bit of math. I know about exponents, okay? You're growing exponentially. And that's why it's important to do that. You know, if you're into social media, you know, please get involved with us at the DOE. Join us, I think, I make a plug from our communication director, Matt Cardoso. You can go on Twitter as Georgia or as GAS Future, and we're on Facebook at GAS Future or / Georgia Future, educatedgeorgiafuture.org. So become involved, become engaged. It does take time, but our children are worth it. That's why I say thank you for coming, because you came here for kids, and that means a lot. It means a lot. And you came here for you as educators because you love your profession. I think speaking as a teacher, and that's why I consider myself a teacher. I know we didn't get into this just for money. Money's not the thing we did, but it's because we have a passion for what we do, and we want to be treated with respect. We want to be treated as professionals. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people that have kind of criticized professionals and criticized public education, but we've got to be out there selling ourselves. That's part of the business person. Today, where we used to have that, where people would come in, and education was accepted, it was important to have. Those days are not here anymore. So we've got to be aggressive. We've got to get out and do it. And so I encourage you to do that. Take what you've heard. Again, if you disagree with things that I've said, please let me know. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I will listen. I will take it, into heartfelt consideration. If there's things that you want people, to know, I will share with you. I will share with the governor. I will share with the lieutenant governor, with members of the General Assembly, with the state school board. I share it with even my deputy superintendents and staff. So, it is something I try to communicate. But again, on behalf of myself and the Department of Education, I want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Superintendent, thank you for opening up the school system. Mr. Money, thank you for opening up the school. This means a lot. This is really you're the first place I get to go to at the beginning of the school year. Like I said, right now we have a lot of great things to tell the rest of Georgia and the nation about what's going on down here in Houston County. Some people mistakenly call it Houston, but we can always correct that. Okay, so again, thank you very much. We'll be around, but please continue to be engaged. And again, I hope you have a great school year, and they will come back, real soon. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.